I could tell lots of stories, but another question I asked people was, is this better than last time? And in Herat, they said yes. I do think that Afghanistan has many. It had historically never been a single group. It's always been fractured. I think there are signs of real positive movement. We had 660 candidates running for office in Kabul for 33 seats. Is it possible that, do you think they could have turned out in that number 10 years ago? There were 150 candidates for, I don't remember how many seats in Herat. You had a big turnout, a larger turnout of women candidates. We interviewed several. One of them was a recent graduate of George Washington University of Political Science. I asked her, what are you doing at this polling station? She says, oh, we're just bringing water for our workers. Okay. I think there are a lot of positive signs. Remember, this is the second election that Afghans have had to run themselves. I'm not an expert in American history, but I think we'd have to go dust a lot more elections in our country to see something that really makes sense. Thank you, Caroline and Marvin.
I think 17.
Was it 17?
17 seats.
Yeah. Most of them, there were a significant number of polling stations at 3:30 were out of ballots. That's a problem. There was a huge issue with the Hazaras in the Jabril district. There was deliberate, there's no way you can get around it, deliberate disenfranchisement of the Hazaras. They knew it. And they were, I won't go into the details. There were. There's funky stuff going on all the time. But what the mood was that I observed in my very small segment of observation, that people were happy. People were thinking, I'm going to do it. And I came away with the feeling that the concept of one person, one vote, popular representative government is catching hold at the poll station level faster than it is on the elected officials level.
And all this, even while, as Carolyn pointed out, everybody agrees that the situation, the security situation in the country is deteriorating. So you've got these running by plan.
My name is Mike Signer. I was also an observer. I was in Panjshir, which is totally different from a lot of other areas in Afghanistan. I guess I sort of realized it's like the two-handed economist always has one hand on the other hand. That was, as I've listened to a lot of the debrief and the post-analysis of this that's been going on for a while, there is always another hand for what your observations about Afghanistan, which I think is actually a pretty relevant insight about the analysis, because the country is so complex and it's so differentiated and so variegated that it is very frustrating to singular policy imperatives. And I think that in a lot of the analysis that you're hearing now, and you're definitely going to hear before October 31st, which is when the official results come out, is there is almost always an agenda behind what somebody says as an analysis. I think not all of us obviously accept it, but there is almost always an agenda that creeps in because we either want the mission to succeed or we want to get out. And I think that's really important to understanding, because that's an enormous amount of prefatory stuff, but I think it actually is pretty significant. And if anybody hasn't, the Great Game is this play that's on right now at the Shakespeare Theater, and I would urge anyone here who's really interested in the
I
problem.
guess it's closed.
Did it just?
No. If you want to go to New York,
well,
it's going to be.
It was remarkable, and the debates. Anyway, so all that said, my experience was in Panjshir, which has a very specific history because it's a very small province, one of the smallest, and it was the home of Ahmed Massoud, Commander Massoud, who was the leading Mujahideen figure who repelled the Soviets. So it had a very proud tradition of being Pashtun, anti-Soviet, very secure, anti-Taliban. They had, so I had the privilege of sort of seeing, you know, among the 34 different stories in Pakistan, which, I mean, in Afghanistan, which is part of the story in Afghanistan, it's a very particular one where it was relatively secure, it was relatively safe. They were very proud of the fact that there was no Taliban infiltration. The PRT there is the only civilian-led. There's a state official who's running it, which is significant in its own right. There are only 2 candidates. I observed the same festive mood. I observed the same profusion of campaigning materials, which I was highly significant. There was a palpable pride among the people who were running the election. I thought that was significant. In a post-election interview with a woman who was the incumbent member of parliament, and she was sitting with the head of the IEC in his office, which seemed totally, I mean, there's a lot of machine politics that's developing. I asked them, well, what's the number one thing you want from Afghanistan? They said a good report. They saw legitimacy as really important. On the other hand, there's always another hand, there was, I observed tremendous pessimism about leaders in Afghanistan, about politicians, worse than I see in the United States. I thought people were extremely cynical. They said, you know, over and over I asked them, what do you think about politicians? They said they're just out for themselves. You know, they don't follow through on any of their promises. I asked them who, you know, one guy said, I said, well, who do you look up to? And he said, my only commander is Massoud, who's a Tajik from. So they're looking back. I mean, that whole region is in a state of nostalgia for a guy who died 10 years ago. And they could only come up with one person that they looked up to who was an economics professor who's not involved in politics in Kabul. I saw tremendous, I mean, the security situation will break your heart because there is now a parallel Taliban shadow government in every single one of the provinces, and that exists to provide justice. People don't get justice from legitimate states. They're getting politics from legitimate states, and they're getting pork. And a lot of dollars are flowing, which is significant, but they're not getting justice. So to resolve a dispute, they'll go commercial dispute. You know, somebody breaks a contract with you, they'll go to the Taliban. You know, person, and that has spillover effects on politics. The thing that I thought was the most interesting, though, is I do think that there are signs of a consolidating sort of constitutional guardian class who are elites who actually care. And I thought that most significantly was group called FIFA, which is basically a domestic election monitoring group, which had thousands of monitors at every single. I went to 9 polls. I saw FIFA monitors at I think 7 of them. These are people who were responsible in the last election for getting the International Election Complaints Commission, or Electoral Complaints Commission started, which is significant if you start having elites who care enough about the system to monitor elections and set up. I think that actually is very important. But again, there's always another on the other hand. So.
Thank you very much. Caroline and
Yeah,
Marvin.
all of us really are, will be delighted to take questions at this point.
Yeah, we're very lucky to have had different perspectives from around the country. And let's open the floor. If you could please state your name.
You want to recognize people?
Sure. The gentleman who were bringing you your...
I'm Henry Black.